Welcome everybody to the May CTIPP CAN call. I'm Dan Press, the General Counsel of CTIPP, and my co-host is Jesse Kohler, the Executive Director. And we've got a really exciting and packed agenda today. The highlight of that is a presentation by Professor Kimberly Noble, who's going to be reporting on a groundbreaking study she did that shows a direct correlation between infant cognitive ability development and poverty. It just has huge implications for government policy, assuming they pay attention to facts. Before I turn it over to Jesse, I just wanted to thank all of you who participated in our workshop series. We had 8 terrific workshops with hundreds of people joining for each one. If you missed any, you can, Jesse will put the information in the chat box about how to access the recordings of them. But the big message that came through from the workshops is there's a real desire for a national trauma-informed community. People want to engage with other people who are working on trauma-informed work. And in our June CTIPP CAN call, we're going to be soliciting your advice, your thoughts on how we build that national community. What are the next steps following the workshop? So you have a month to think about it. We really appreciate any advice you have. There are just so many great people out there doing such great stuff. And we think if we're finding ways to connect them, we can enhance everybody's ability and enhance the health and social welfare of this country. So we look forward to your thoughts in June. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jesse to introduce our next presenter.
Thanks, Dan. So in the chat, you'll see the first item is the National Prevention Science Coalition to Improve Lives website. That workshop series was done in partnership between CTIPP, NPSC, as well as PACES Connection and several other organizations that you can see on that site. We are grateful to all of them. You can watch all of the recordings there or on our YouTube channel. And then the second link that I put is that we developed a resource center based on the chat activity that was going on, as well as a number of the resources shared by our presenters throughout that workshop. And so you can see those resources, feel free to use them, watch the videos. We will work on condensing them. I will acknowledge that it is an overwhelming amount of videos. It is like over 30 hours worth of information, but you can see it broken down by topic item, and we will continue to work that down. So grateful to everybody who was involved, all of our presenters, all of the attendees, and we look forward to continuing to build upon the momentum in the Building the Movement workshop series. And in terms of building the movement, I just want to say that one of the things that we recognize is that in the way that it was constructed this past year, it was pretty one-dimensional for the audience, right? We had the breakout rooms afterward, but it was that webinar style format. And we do want to get more input and learn more about what's going on in communities, to what Dan just said. And one very exciting initiative that is allowing for that to happen right now this month, in the month of May, as Mental Health and Trauma Informed Awareness Month, is an initiative that we are supporting called We Heal Us, that was led really by Illinois and Pennsylvania, and CTIPP is thrilled to have played a small role in helping to convene and set it up. And so I want to turn the tables over quickly to Heather Proctor and Marianne McEvoy to sort of explain very quickly, not giving it enough justice, but sort of where We Heal Us came from, the resources, how to get involved as the month of May continues, and what to expect moving forward. So Heather and Marianne, I turn it over to you.
Heather, I'm going to let you begin because you really started us down this path. So.
Hello, my name is Heather Proctor. I really just, I sound old saying this, but it warms the cockles of my heart because I actually know some have been able through this to meet some of you. So I think that that's really exciting, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share with you today kind of what we've come up with, and we're really hopeful will help things move forward. So in January, I had an idea, how do we help amplify the voices of existing organizations who are doing amazing work around trauma awareness and mental health? Through the lens of COVID, we've all know what we've been through, right? And we're all continuously going through it, not just in our veins of where we work, but just as communities and as a nation. So really being able to get rid of the siloed approach to mental health as a standalone and trauma awareness as a standalone, but also being able to bring that voice together. We created a public-private partnership, which has transcended through states and the nation now, and we are really super excited. So we have contributing partners. The resources are free that have been coming together, networking more. And it's really just, that component has been on fire, actually. The way that people have been able to network just in the same frame of mind, in the same vein of trauma awareness and mental health, we're super excited about. And then, so we have also partners with the toolkit that we put together from those resources. And we are in the middle of this campaign now in this movement, getting that information out. Marianne, do you kind of want to take it from there? What we've been doing?
So when Heather's team reached out to us in Pennsylvania at the Office of Advocacy and Reform, we immediately said, we definitely want to jump in and do something with Illinois. So that's how this started. And I think that what drew our team to it was the ability to create one place where so many free resources could be housed for individuals to get access to. That was really the part of the vision that PA wanted to jump right in on, because we have a coalition known as Heal PA in Pennsylvania that's really trying to support the dissemination of this information to everybody. So we've just been really excited to be a part of it. And I'm excited to see once the month concludes, it sounds like we'll have all the recordings of all of the events, live events and everything living on the website throughout the year. So it's just nice to know that there's going to be that one place where people can go to if they need some information.
Absolutely. And then thank you to Heather, Marianne. Your leadership through this, and so many folks in Pennsylvania and Illinois, as well as New Jersey, Arizona, other states. It's been remarkable, and we hope to continue to see this scaffold in future years, where we know that healing is not just going to take place 1 month out of the year, but to recognize the time in the month of May and really continue to leverage what is seen as Mental Health Awareness Month, leveraging, growing upon that to be Mental Health and Trauma Informed Awareness Month, and eventually creating an annual calendar of just, we're always taking care of our mental health, and we're always being trauma informed, we're always being healing centered. We'll continue to work through that. That's what building the movement's all about. I put the website to We Heal Us in the chat box, and you can find additional information on social media if you type up the hashtag follow. And so Heather, Marianne, thank you. Very excited to see what comes about throughout the remainder of the month. Excited about what has been happening so far and looking forward to years ahead as well. So just one more time, thank you for all that you've done to help set this up. With that, want to turn it over to our Director of Government Affairs, Jen Kurt, to do a legislative update. So Jen, over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Jesse. Hi, everyone. It's good to see all of you again this month. We've got some exciting updates on what's happening around trauma and ACEs in Washington, D.C. And then I will kick it to Jesse to talk a little bit about our monthly call to action that we can, if you're interested in participating, you can. But I'll run through some updates, and we can also put some more links in the chat for other information on this stuff if you want to dive a little bit deeper. Last month, we spoke about the Post-Disaster Mental Health Response Act. This is a bipartisan bicameral bill in both the U.S. House and Senate that helps survivors of disasters like natural disasters, terrorist attacks, mass violent events with community-based free resources. This has passed both the House and Senate committees, and we're really pushing for a floor vote in June. And so CTIPP brought some coalition members together who've endorsed the bill in a letter to leadership, really fighting for that, and really hoping that our advocacy pays off and that we're able to get that one across the finish line before the end of this congressional session. There's some great action being taken by several agencies and offices within the federal workforce that I wanted to provide a quick update on. The Office of National Drug Control Policy, ONDCP, is an office under the White House, which many of you may be familiar with. It's typical for an administration to release a national drug control strategy for how they're going to tackle different drug-related issues. In late April, President Biden released his national drug control strategy, and there was a lot in there about the trauma being at the root of substance use and addressing trauma and ACEs as essential to tackling the substance use disorder sort of crisis, as well as doing prevention and early intervention. So in the background, they provided a lot of context on how we have to understand that the origins of substance use among youth, is really correlated with adverse childhood experiences, their connection to social determinants of health and equity. It's possible to prevent youth exposure to ACEs and reduce the harms associated with ACEs among individuals who have already experienced them. And that's such an important part to the administration about tackling the drug problem. So we were really excited to see that as part of the report. And if you want to read the full report, we'll have links available for you there. The Secretary of Education, Cardona, released an op-ed talking about his plan to improve education. This is the US Department of Education. And he in there referenced, the need to address educational disparities, support students' mental health needs as we recover from the pandemic. And he specifically named improving educator preparation and trauma-informed practices. So he specifically wants to, embed trauma-informed practices in schools through educators, and CTIPP is engaging with the department to encourage that whole of school trauma-informed practice lens, not just the educators, but whole of school. So that was a powerful op-ed, though it's great to be able to be updated on the vision of the department. And then there have been a number of new grants out of SAMHSA that are nonprofits are eligible for. So in our PACES blog for PACES Connection, we shared some links to those grant programs in case folks might be interested in taking a look through those for possible funding streams for you or your partners. And then on the legislative front, a couple of strong bills that have trauma provision have passed the House. So the Community Services Block Grant Modernization Act last week passed the House. This is the only federal program with the explicit and overarching goal of reducing poverty regardless of its cause. And we worked with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley to ensure that some of the eligible use of funds under that block grant include partnerships in local communities to prevent or to promote healthy communities by preventing and mitigating trauma. So that one heads to the Senate, as well as the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which helps people who face barriers to employment. And we have a special guest from Capitol Hill who later in today's call will share a little bit about Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, also known as WIOA, which also included some really great trauma training for workforce providers through that program. And then, you may have been following the news on this, but just some quick updates. Last week, the president acknowledged 1 million deaths due to COVID-19. He has asked since March for Congress to provide additional funding to help control the pandemic, but Congress is still looking for opportunities to pass that because there are some political hurdles there. Yesterday, the president was in Buffalo, New York to acknowledge Saturday's mass shooting. The House is looking to try and pass the Bipartisan Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act as a response to that. And then this week, the Senate is trying to pass $40 billion in aid to Ukraine to support the efforts to fight back against Russia. So those are just a few of the, the initiatives in Congress that are making the news and that are, obviously somewhat in some ways related to trauma. And I will turn it over then to Jesse to talk a little bit about MIECHV.
Thank you, Jen, and I invite you to fill in any blanks that I leave around MIECHV. But for those who don't know, MIECHV stands for Maternal Infant Early Childhood Home Visiting Program. It's a federally authorized program that helps provide home visiting, high-quality home visiting across the country. It is going to need to be reauthorized at the end of September this year. And in line with the National Home Visiting Coalition, there are a few specific asks, in addition to just reauthorizing, around increasing essentially equity and access. And so in addition to the reauthorization in this Congress, the three main additional asks is an increase in MIECHV funding by $200 million a year every year for the next 5 years. The reauthorization lasts for 5 years. There's also an additional ask to double the tribal set-aside for MIECHV funding, and then to continue to allow for virtual home visiting with model fidelity as an improved option for service delivery are the three additional asks, as well as please reauthorize MIECHV. And so, in line again with the the National Home Visiting Coalition, we are working with another organization called the Stop Abuse Campaign to help mobilize around getting signers and writing letters and doing some outreach for support around MIECHV reauthorization. And so you can find in the chat a link to that. So you all know, because we are doing this in partnership with the Stop Abuse Campaign, both organizations will be receiving the emails of those who sign up. So just as a disclaimer, so you know that. But we really look forward to promoting MIECHV. It's very important. There's a huge cost-benefit analysis of high-quality home visiting programs. Some of the other benefits are that it improves, or it reduces rather, cases of abuse and neglect. It's just a very, very just a hugely beneficial program when it's done with fidelity to the model. And so we certainly encourage folks to currently sign up for the petition as the campaign leading up to September 30th, when reauthorization is going to happen, continues. We're going to be reaching out for letter writing campaigns and calling Congress people. And so please just feel free to sign up now. Send it to your networks as well. Jen, I'm curious if there's anything else you want to add about either this or anything else, but in the chat you can find the links to sign up for some more information about MIECHV. And so, Jen, to round out our government affairs time, legislative update time.
Yeah, I think that was a great summary. I mean, unfortunately, when programs like this, when they are not reauthorized and then they expire, a lot of times these services are just no longer available. There are some loopholes for certain programs, but this really runs the risk of, if it's not reauthorized, just ceasing to exist. And it's so important for the reasons you mentioned, but also for maternal health and preventing that and decreasing family separation through the child welfare system. And so, reauthorization is not only an opportunity to provide a lifeline for the program and extend it, but it's also an opportunity to strengthen it as that legislation makes its way through the branches. So, the more support from the outside and from the organizations will help put some pressure to try and prioritize reauthorizing this by any vehicle necessary. So, appreciate your attention and possible support of this.
Thanks so much, Jen. The last thing that I'll say on it is that through the campaign, we really want to highlight parents as the heroes. to get people's attention and to get signers. And so if there is anybody who knows parents who have been supported by home visitors or the home visiting programs and know of any stories and feel comfortable making connections, certainly are open to learning the actual impacts and highlighting and leveraging actual impacts and stories that show the effectiveness of home visiting programs. I don't see Kim on the call just yet.
Yeah, she's going to come on at 2:30. But before you do that, there was a comment in the chat by Jeffrey Gordon, which I thought is be worth highlighting, and maybe Jeff could talk about it. It's about he says when childhood history are known. Wait a second. When childhood histories are known, abuse correlates significantly with becoming a mass shooter. And there was actually an op-ed in the Washington Post earlier this week, also talking about the correlation between early childhood abuse and mass shooting. Jeffrey, do you want to just elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. I think this is an underappreciated thing. There's a book. No, let me start. There's a grant from the Justice Department to two people. I'll go get the book, just a second. And their names are Gillian Peterson and James Densley. They're both kind of anthropologists, sociologists, and therapists. And they have a good grant, and they created a database of all the mass shooters in the United States since the 1990s, some 200 odd incidents. And their database is accessible on the internet, and you can look at it. It's extensive with a huge amount of demographic data. What is significant is the book they wrote called The Violence Project is eminently readable. It's a combination of statistics, academia, and case studies. And about such a grim topic, it's almost enjoyable. They are responsible for the op-ed recently in the Washington Post and a previous one, which they wrote themselves. But when you look at their spreadsheet, of around 200 mass shooters, they had childhood data on 66 of them, and 60 of them had documented child abuse in their background. So child abuse does contribute greatly to this social pathology. There you go, all done in 2 seconds.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. Yeah, it was listening to Jen's presentation about the policy out of the Office of the White House Drug Control. 3 years ago, Congress passed the Support Act to address opioid use, and there was nothing in there about addressing trauma, addressing prevention. And now 3 years later, we have another epidemic. And the mass shooting is the same thing. The role that childhood abuse trauma plays in opioid use and in mass shootings just is underappreciated. And I think it falls upon all of us to try and change that dialogue and make people aware that there are explanations that provide for solutions. So thank you very much, Jeffrey, for raising that issue.
Yeah, and just want to highlight, with all the mass shootings that are going on, there's a confluence of factors, and it's affecting folks in so many ways and in various communities. I know that in internal conversations we discussed how, at this point it's hard to even go to a grocery store for some people, understandably so. And so just want to encourage folks to, in this moment, take care of themselves in the way that they need. As we discuss wounds that are still relatively fresh, pretty fresh, and continue to reopen. It's heavy, and there need to be multiple approaches to solving the deeper impacts as well as the causes. of, what is now transgenerational trauma, intergenerational trauma, as well as direct and secondary and vicarious trauma that continues to perpetuate throughout our society. And so CTIPP put out a statement, and we certainly are standing with all communities impacted and all individuals impacted by the recent events. Dan, I've got to imagine that Kim is going to join us very shortly. I will send her a quick email, but if you want to give some introduction for when she joins and just able
Sure.
to hop on.
Yeah. Just one last point on the violence issue. CTIPP is about to engage a dialogue with the Surgeon General's office, and we plan to raise this. I know they're very, very concerned about the issue of violence, and particularly youth violence, and we plan to emphasize the importance of addressing trauma, just the way we're pleased that the Office of Drug Policy finally has made trauma a key part of its approach to addressing opioid use. But let me go on and introduce our next speaker, because it really is an honor to introduce Kimberly Noble. When an article or a study by a bunch of academics ends up in the front section of the New York Times, it's important. It has important policy implications. And the study that Kimberly just led, showing the correlation between poverty and infant cognition development, is really one of those issues that I think is going to have a really important policy implications. Professor Kimberly Noble is a professor at Columbia Teachers College. She has a Ph.D. and a M.D. She's a licensed pediatrician. She also is director of the Early Experience Developmental, I take it back, the Neurocognition Early Experience and Developmental Lab at Teachers College. Professor Noble is also a great trauma advocate. I had the privilege of working with her. The two of us, along with a couple of other faculty at Columbia, put together an organization called Trauma Free NYC that is promoting trauma-informed approaches both on the Columbia campus and in the wider city. And Professor Noble is a key part of that, and trauma is really a key part of her way of approaching the problems that she's wrestling with through her lab. So she's been in tremendous demand to present. We're really honored that she was able to spare some time to present to us. We only have a half an hour, but I hope she'll come on soon, and we really appreciate you being here.
Hi, Dan. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. And thank you all very much for the invitation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slides. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Baby's First Year study, which is the first randomized controlled trial of poverty reduction in early childhood. And I should just preface it by saying that we're so incredibly grateful to the communities and the 1,000 families who've trusted us and partnered with us on this work. So the background of the study is that we've known for a very long time, many decades, that growing up in poverty puts children at risk for a host of detrimental outcomes, everything from lower school achievement to worse health to less likelihood of gainful employment in adulthood. And it turns out that just small differences in annual family income are associated with pretty remarkable differences in children's outcomes. So for example, a $4,000 difference in annual income between the prenatal year and age age 2 has been associated with higher cognitive development, higher earnings when children reach adulthood, greater likelihood of employment, and better health. But of course, those studies are all correlational. So we can say that poverty is associated with those outcomes, but we can't say for sure whether poverty is causing those differences in outcomes. And we really don't have any current causal evidence on the effects of income in early childhood. And so we built the Baby's First Year study off of this idea that it was really time to move past correlations to understand whether changing family income for families facing poverty would actually cause differences for their children. So back in 2018, we launched Baby's First Years, which is the first randomized controlled trial of poverty reduction in early childhood. So what did we do? We began recruiting 1,000 moms living with low incomes shortly after they gave birth in a number of hospitals around the United States. So this was literally recruiting moms right there on the postpartum wards within a day or two of their giving birth. They were recruited from 4 cities: New York, the Omaha area, the Twin Cities, and New Orleans. And upon enrolling in the study, all moms were told that they would receive a monthly unconditional cash gift that they would be free to spend however they would like, no strings attached. But importantly, they were randomized into 1 of 2 groups. So the group that we call the high cash gift group is receiving $333 a month or $4,000 a year. And the group that we call the low cash gift group is receiving $20 a month or $240 a year. And those amounts were chosen very intentionally. So of course, back when we launched this or began planning the study 10 years ago, we certainly wouldn't have been able to dream about the American Rescue Plan. But nonetheless, it was an amount that has been shown to make a difference in the lives of children. So that $4,000 a year amount was an amount that we thought would likely move the needle. And it was an amount that we thought would be relevant to policymakers. Again, we didn't have a crystal ball, but we reasoned that it was similar in size to other social services and benefits that moms living with low income might qualify for. The money is administered on a debit card that we gave to the mom in the hospital. It came preloaded for the first month, and the mom gets notified by text every month when the next disbursement is made. To date, we've put more than $5 million into the pockets of the mothers in our study. And by measuring the differential impact of poverty reduction in these 2 groups, we'll actually be able to say something about the causal impact of poverty reduction on early childhood cognitive, emotional, and brain development in the first few years of life. I mentioned that the cash is being handed out on a debit card. It's branded For My Baby. And of note, we don't require a social security number or a tax identification number. That's because I've been referring to the cash payments as gifts. They do count as legal gifts. So mothers are not required to do anything in return. They could never participate in research again, and they would still get the cash gifts. And that's really important because the fact that they're gifts means that they're not taxable. And we worked very hard prior to the launch of the study to ensure that to the extent possible, these gifts wouldn't count in determining their eligibility for social services and benefits. So moms are not losing their benefits as a result of getting these gifts. In 2 of the 4 cities, we went agency by agency to secure those waivers. And in the other 2 states, we actually worked with individuals to get state legislation passed saying that for these moms in this study, this money won't count in determining their benefits. Okay, so as a neuroscientist, I'm very interested in the impact of this poverty intervention on the developing brain. We're, of course, measuring lots of other different outcomes as well that I'm happy to talk about. So how do we measure the impact of poverty reduction on brain activity? We use a technique called electroencephalography, or EEG, that you can see here. Consists of this stretchy cap of electrodes that you can think of kind of like microphones that listen in to the brain's activity. Now, obviously, we're not mind readers. We don't know what a person is thinking, but we are able to use those electrodes to measure the speed of the brain's electrical signal. So how quickly brain cells are communicating with each other. Now, we all have some very fast-paced brain activity, some slower-paced brain activity. That's normal. Everybody has everything. But we believe that poverty tends to be associated with differences in these signals. So for example, we have previously reported that we don't see any differences at birth between infants born to different socioeconomic groups. So no association between income and brain activity at birth. But we see the emergence of income-related patterns later. So past work has suggested that children growing up in poverty or facing other forms of early adversity often have less fast-paced and more slow-paced activity compared to their more advantaged peers. And we care about that because that's a pattern that's also been associated with subsequent learning and attention problems in school. And so we reasoned that by reducing poverty, we might mitigate this pattern. So specifically, we reasoned that the infants of the moms in the high cash gift group might show more fast-paced brain activity and less slow-paced brain activity compared to the infants of the moms in the low cash gift group. And so that's partly what we reported in a paper that you may have heard about. It came out a few months ago in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. So to walk you through this, here on the left side of your screen, I'm showing you the average brains of the high cash gift group. Here on the right, I'm showing you the average of the low cash gift group. And those colors are showing you where across the scalp we're seeing different kinds of brain activity. And so when we look at fast-paced brain activity, I think you can pretty clearly see we're seeing more of it in the high cash gift group. So warmer colors represent more. So in the high cash gift group, we're seeing more fast-paced brain activity compared to the low cash gift group. Likewise, for very fast-paced brain activity, we're seeing more of this high-speed brain activity in the high cash gift group and the low cash gift group. And notably, that's being driven by differences in the frontal and central parts of the brain that are known to support the subsequent development of higher cognitive skills. So this pattern is similar to what we would expect in brain patterns that support the subsequent development of thinking and learning. Now, of course, the jury is still out. This is brain activity, but it's not behavior. We're very much looking forward to welcoming the families back into our university research spaces beginning this coming summer as the children begin to turn 4 years of age. That's really going to be a critical time both to re-measure brain activity and also to measure other types of standardized cognitive and behavioral assessments so that we can see if we're seeing any impacts of the poverty reduction intervention on things like language development or the development of self-regulation or social emotional skills. So stay tuned for that for sure. Now, we're often asked, what are the policy implications of this work? Certainly, it's our hope that we'll have the potential to provide evidence of the effects of poverty reduction on the developing child and family life. Now, it's clear that the policy landscape has changed dramatically since we began began planning this work 10 years ago. Back then, people said, well, you'll never see a world where there are unconditional cash transfers given at the federal level. Of course, the one-year expansion of the child tax credit really was exactly that. So built into part of the American Rescue Plan, it meant that not only was the child tax credit expanded in terms of the generosity of the benefit given to the children in the home, but also it became fully refundable, which means that so previously, families who didn't earn enough income to owe taxes weren't able to benefit from the child tax credit. But during that one-year extension, that was no longer the case. So all families, even very low income families, did benefit from this monthly, for part of the year, monthly cash transfer for children. So it's our hope that the resulting work from this study will inform debates on the generosity or cuts both to existing safety net programs as well as potential new programs in the form of tax refunds or child allowances. Because while we would never suggest that income is the only or even the most important factor in determining child development, it may be one that's particularly manipulable to policy. So I intentionally kept my remarks brief to be able to open it up for questions. So I'll just say many thanks to my collaborators and our generous funders, and I will stop sharing and very happy to answer any questions about the study.
Thanks so much, Kim. Encourage and invite folks to continue to put questions in the chat from that wonderful presentation. The first question from Jesse is what are the control variables in the birth brain activity?
So one of the wonderful things about doing a randomized control trial is that if you randomize correctly, right, your two groups should be identical before the start of the intervention. And then after that, any differences that you see are the results of the intervention. And so the two groups were indistinguishable on 27 demographic and background factors at birth. And then we also control for those factors, even though we don't think that there are differences when we do the analysis at age 1. So that brain activity outcome at age 1 controlled for a whole host of demographic and other factors that measured before the start of the intervention.
Thanks. Lisa asked how old the kids were when this study started, and how many were in the study.
Sure. So we recruited 1,000 moms and their newborns at the start of the study. So we recruited them when the babies were just a day or two old. And then we began these monthly unconditional cash transfers. So moms get this cash every month on the day of the child's birthday. And then we've been following up with the families annually around the time of the child's birthday. So that first result I just showed you came from the 1 year follow-up when the children were about 12 months old. And for that visit, we traveled into the homes of the families and collected a bunch of data. So we collected survey information from the moms. We collected a measure of maternal hair cortisol, so stress hormone, and we did this portable EEG. So we brought EEG into the homes of the families to be able to measure infant brain activity in the home. You know, for those of you with children or who've interacted with very young children, you know that direct assessments of 12-month-olds are difficult, right? They might be cranky or hungry or tired or just afraid of strangers. So it's very difficult to directly assess child development at that age. But you can get a little look under the hood by doing this brain activity measure, where, as I showed you in the photo, you know, the children can sit comfortably on their parents' lap. They're generally pretty tolerant of this 5-minute or so measure of brain activity. It doesn't feel like anything other than a cap. We're not putting anything into the brain. We're just listening in. Subsequent to age 1, we've been following up annually. So because of the pandemic, the age 1 visits had to be cut short, unfortunately. So we only were able to go in person for about half of the sample, although we were able to collect survey information from nearly everybody. So we had about 94% retention over the course of that first year, although only about half of that was in person because of the pandemic. Subsequently, again, because of the pandemic, age 2 was completely remote, so just limited to a phone survey. Age 3, which is ongoing right now, has also been limited to a phone survey, but we're really looking forward to age 4, which will be launched in just about a month and a half this coming summer, when we'll be once again able to visit with the families in person. And this time, instead of us traveling to them, we're inviting them into our research spaces so that we can do state-of-the-art assessments of cognition, behavior, and brain development.
We are all looking forward to that follow-up at the 4-year mark.
Yeah.
From Melissa, is fast-paced brain activity a good thing?
Yeah, so a great question that I sort of whizzed right past that. So past work has suggested that in general, kids who show more fast-paced brain activity early in childhood tend to subsequently score higher on cognitive and other tests later in childhood. Now, that's tantalizing evidence, very suggestive, saying that the fact that we saw differences in these patterns is suggesting that we're setting kids on a different trajectory. But obviously, it's all going to come down to actually measuring cognition and behavior as the kids age into those visits.
Thank you. Richard says this is a wonderful study. Have any communities or states been active in taking the results of this study to implement a program based on this study?
That's a great question. So we do have a number of states and programs who are actively following us, many of whom were very helpful in getting that legislation passed. So just last week, I was in visiting our Omaha site where we met with a bunch of local and state stakeholders, some of whom are very interested in potentially translating this into state legislation. So I wouldn't say yet that that's happened, but people are very interested. And as you may be aware, there are a whole host of through universal basic income pilots happening all around the country. So lots of efforts to look at what is the direct impact of cash going on.
There was a question about the brainwave picture in particular. I'm wondering if it would be helpful to pull that back up. But what was the age of the babies in that image that you showed?
Oh, I can tell you the image that we measured was at 12 months or so. Let's see. I think I showed you an image that we have from our lab of, yeah, okay. So I showed you a few different things. So I'm not sure which one you're talking about, but I'll just share. So I again, presented pretty quickly, but so this might be the one you're talking about. So these are newborns. So we have some work. So this isn't from baby's first year. This is past work. No, it's not letting me advance. Okay. So this work, these are newborns who were just a few days old that we found absolutely no link between income and brain activity at birth. So that's a newborn. That would be what you're talking about. But then subsequently, I don't show you a picture here, but subsequently looking at infants who are a bit older, between 6 and 12 months, we start to see the emergence of socioeconomic disparities. So income being associated with differences in brain outcomes. But of course, we didn't know if income was causing those differences until we did this study. And I don't show you a picture of our mobile caps, but the study I spent most of the time talking about was in 12-month-old infants.
Gotcha.
Let me ask Kim, do you have any theories about what it is about poverty that produces this?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked. So we do. We've got a few sort of main pathways that we presumed were underlying these differences. So one we call the investment pathway, and that's the idea that with greater economic resources, moms are more likely to be able to afford things like books and toys, maybe higher quality childcare, perhaps better housing and safer neighborhoods. And the other we call the reduced stress pathway. And that's the idea that if moms are less worried about how they're going to make their monthly rent check or keep the lights on, they're more likely to be able to engage with their children in the kinds of warm and nurturing ways that we know are so important for child development. Now, we are measuring those pathways carefully as we go along. I think one of the important things to remember about cash is that it empowers families to use it as they need. So it may well be that the pathways between cash and children's outcomes may look a little bit different in each family, right? One family might use it to buy books, might use it to buy healthier food, one might use it to offset and, not work that third job so they can spend more time at home. So I think the pathways are going to look a little bit different. I can tell you that very preliminarily, what we're seeing is more support for the investment pathway than for the stress pathway early on. So early on, we're seeing more child-focused expenditures, more time spent that moms are reporting spending with the child, doing things like reading and playing. And we're not really seeing detectable differences in maternal stress yet. Now, is it because having a 1-year-old is stressful? Is it because we're all in the midst of a pandemic? Is it because it takes longer to really move those stress pathways? Right? Those are all questions that are outstanding.
Do you see a trauma connection in any way, given all your work in trauma?
Yeah, so it's something that we're measuring, right? We're looking at various kinds of trauma, things like intimate partner violence, among others, involvement with CPS, and so we'll be able to measure over the coming years as to whether this cash gift does reduce trauma. Like I said, we're not seeing, at least early on, differences in maternal reports of stress or differences in mental health, but I think it remains to be seen whether we see trauma differences specifically.
That's so exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan.
I think that answers that conversation, sort of helped to answer Melissa's question as well. So thank you for that. Also, before I get into some of the remaining questions, And Kim, I really appreciate it. I don't mean to put you on the hot seat. Like you're just answering them all.
Yeah. No, this is great.
If there are questions based off of questions as well, please continue to feel free to load those into the chat we've got until 3:00. But Lisa asked, what did the parent participants know about the study going in? And did they have enough knowledge that might possibly guide their decisions about what they did with the money?
That's a great question. A couple things. So it would be coercive if we went into the hospital room of a mother who just gave birth and said, hey, do you want the chance to receive $4,000 a year if you participate in a study? So we didn't do that. Instead, we said, we're doing a longitudinal study of child development and family life. If you're interested, we'll do a baseline survey today. You'll get $50 for your time. And then we'll follow up again annually around the time of your children's birthday to do some more activities. Are you interested? So we first enrolled families who were, by definition, interested and willing to participate in research. So we, went through the informed consent process, did the baseline survey, compensated them for their time, and then said, oh, and by the way, there's this other thing. If you're interested, I have a debit card here. We'll go online and activate it. And the computer will tell us how much money you'll get. You'll get a cash gift every month, either $20 or $333. Do you want to participate? Almost everybody said yes. You can imagine there might be various reasons why someone might decline that. We didn't find out why people declined when they did, but almost everybody said, yes, of course, this is amazing. And we're very, very happy. We do not give any kind of financial literacy training or anything else about what to spend the money on, right? It's truly unrestricted. They can spend it however they like. So we didn't try to guide their decisions in any way. You might have noticed that it is branded the For My Baby card. So to the extent that that's a little nudge, that might suggest to spend it on baby or family friendly things, but we don't restrict spending in any way. And the last thing I'll say is that, sometimes people say, well, was it smart to tell people about the two amounts? What if people were upset by that? For the first, dozen or 2 dozen participants, we actually didn't. We just said the computer will tell us the amount. Let's find out what it is. And then thought about it a little more and realized, this study has gotten quite a lot of press. It got a lot of press a couple months ago when the first paper came out. But even before that, it's been getting press for years before we had recruited the first mom. And in some of those stories, sometimes they mention what the two amounts are. And so we started thinking, it would be as bad as someone might feel to find out they were randomized to the control group that day. They might feel a whole lot worse to read about it in the New York Times. So we actually, after, like I said, the first few dozen or so participants were enrolled, we started telling people about the two amounts, and we went back to those first, few enrollments to let them know what the two amounts were. So we thought it'd be better to be upfront, and nobody really gets upset. $20 a month is still $20 you weren't anticipating, and people tend to be pretty grateful.
Appreciate the thoughtfulness to circle back and to sort of learn as you were going and model the model in that way. Dahlia asked if you have plans to replicate the study in other states, and in her name, it's also just Trauma-Informed Oregon, so I'll put that throw out there just in case
Sure.
there was intention.
Yeah, thank you for the suggestion. I think at this point, we're looking certainly to extend the study so it looks like we're going to be able to continue the cash gifts through age 6, and we're applying for research funding to continue to follow these kiddos for the next 5-year grant period cycle. Certainly, it's my hope that we'll be able to continue to follow up these families, until these kids reach adulthood, because there's all kinds of long-term reach, ways to investigate the long-term reach of poverty reduction that I think could be very meaningful. The likelihood, honestly, of starting over with another 1,000 kids in other locations is maybe a little bit lower, just because we've already spent so much time and energy and resources in getting this particular study off the ground. Believe it or not, it's been a $22 million study to date, partly because of the cash gifts themselves, but also just because of the size and scope of the research.
Well,
Kim, have you begun to engage with Congress on this in any way? And CTIPP is an advocacy organization. Is there any way we can help?
Yeah, we're always happy to give briefings to members of Congress. We've had some people reach out, who were interested in hearing. So we've had some briefings with some staffers, but happy to talk to people.
There's one more question in the chat. Oh, no, that was just my question. Jeff, I see your hand up if you have a quick question as well.
Yes, it was some time ago, but my experience when I was in Texas is that poor families, even eligible for Medicaid, were obligated in some cases to drive 80 or 100 miles to go visit the welfare office just to get enrolled in their health benefits, which they were deemed by the restrictive parameters of the state of Texas to be eligible for. So that what I'm trying to raise is the cultural context of the undeserving poor, and how you think, if this turns out as you expect it to influence that cultural disdain.
Right. So a few answers. So first of all, that those kinds of systemic barriers to receiving social services and benefits are so rampant. And we try to design our study so there really wouldn't be a barrier, right? I mean, it's cash. It comes on the debit card. The mom does not have to do anything for the cash to show up. It's just there. She can use it anywhere. You could use a MasterCard, debit card. So I think those kinds of barriers are a big part of the problem and limit uptake of many interventions in a way that cash is really not limited, right? Everybody wants it, everybody uses it. So your uptake is essentially 100%. In terms of the perception, so we hope so. I mean, we have a paper that just came out a couple of weeks ago showing that after the first year, we're not seeing any differences in terms of purchase of or use of alcohol or tobacco, right? So a lot of people often assume that people will squander the money. The previous research doesn't back that up, but we're not seeing that in our data either. So, I guess it remains to be seen if perceptions change, but hopefully one way to begin to do that is to show that by reducing poverty, we change children's trajectories for the better.
Thanks so much, Kim. I know that there's like 2 minutes left, and so just wondering if there are any last thoughts that you want to leave the group with or conclude this wonderful presentation with.
Well, thank you so much for your time and effort. Always happy to be connected with policymakers or other stakeholders who could help get the word out and support the future of this work.
Well,
Wonderful.
thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Take care. Bye-bye.
Gotten a lot of rounds of applause. I like the virtual rounds of applause. Very, very fun. I want to turn it back over to Jen Kurt to introduce our next presenter and a friend from the Hill, Riley.
Thanks so much, Jesse. That was a great presentation. Yes, I want to introduce a congressional staff champion working on trauma-related policy in the U.S. House of Representatives. Riley Stern has worked for Congresswoman Newman, who represents Illinois' 3rd Congressional District. For the last year and a half in both administrative and legislative roles. She currently handles a legislative portfolio that covers healthcare, education, labor, and mental health policy for the Congresswoman. She's originally from Chicagoland and moved to DC in early 2019 to start her career on Capitol Hill. We worked with Riley on the WIOA bill, which I mentioned earlier. So she is just going to provide some brief remarks on her boss's work in this space. So thanks, Riley. I'll turn it to you.
Hey, thanks, Jen. And hi, everybody. I, as Jen mentioned, work for Congresswoman Newman. She represents Chicago's southwest suburbs in Congress. And I'm excited to talk a little bit about her work. So as Jen was talking about earlier, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, was passed in July of 2014 and is designed to strengthen and improve the nation's public workforce system. Its goal is to help Americans, including youth and those with significant barriers to employment, into high quality jobs and careers, and help employers retain skilled workers. It's the first legislative reform of the public workforce since 1998. And last night, the House passed a WIOA reauthorization bill. So hopefully it continues moving forward and can continue to pass the Senate with some updates. So WIOA requires states to align their workforce development programs to coordinate the needs of job seekers and employers. And the one-stop delivery system is a network that enhances access to workforce development, educational, and other human resource services to improve long-term employment outcomes for job seekers receiving assistance. So my boss has been concerned about the impact of mental health on labor shortages. So over the last several months, our team has been working on legislation to better integrate trauma-informed care and mental health professionals in the federal workforce system. Cook County has been a leader in incorporating trauma-informed practices in their workforce development programming. And this bill was inspired by the work of the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership, who leverages funding through WIOA to advance these trauma-informed approaches. So basically, our bill will require a representative from state mental health agencies to sit in on state workforce development boards, and gives the option of adding a mental health agency representative to local workforce boards. And additionally, it requires entities within the one-stop delivery system to detail their strategies for addressing trauma and mental health with at least 3 action steps. So planning on introducing this bill next week, and I'll continue to work with the House Committee on Ed and Labor, Education and Labor, in hopes to have it included in future legislation. And as an aside, mental health has been one of my boss's top priorities during her time in Congress since she was elected in 2020. And luckily for me, on a personal note, mental health is a personal passion of mine. So it's been really exciting to have a boss who's so passionate about this work, and also to have the opportunity to do the work with her. One of the other bills she's done in this space is designed to address the shortage of mental health workers in schools. So yeah, that's just a little bit about the bill and my boss's work, and yeah.
Thanks so much, Riley. That's really helpful. And just to break it down a little bit further for folks who aren't following WIOA, which I think is most of the US population. So the WIOA reauthorization bill package passed the House yesterday. And it included several trauma provisions, which Riley mentioned, but her boss is also planning to introduce a separate bill, which wasn't included yesterday, but she's hoping will be, included in the final bill that passes, which would go a step further and require, these local grantees of WIOA to put together action steps for how they're going to address trauma. And one thing Riley and I have spoken about is the clear link between ACEs and then problems that lead to poor worker productivity. So ACEs cause relationship problems, mental health challenges, physical pain, addiction, all these things create challenges in the workforce. And I think especially, as people transition back into the workforce, all of that trauma and those side effects of trauma, they are bringing with them. And so this is one of those programs, WIOA, which was not reauthorized on time and expired. So these benefits are not currently being provided in local communities to help people who face these barriers to employment, as well as youth, to get jobs, to get higher quality jobs. So that's rural workers, that's workers historically underrepresented in high paying job, and that's young people. So I think what, Congresswoman Newman is doing such a great job at is trying to make sure that, as we're providing these resources to these workers who face barriers, we're also understanding the impact of trauma on their inability to get and keep jobs because of those side effects. And so that context, bringing that into the conversation and into the legislation is so important in a trauma-informed workforce. So really excited to have Congresswoman Newman as a champion, and appreciate you coming out, Riley. And let me turn it back over to you, Jesse.
Riley, just want to second Jen's thanks to you and your boss for what you're doing to help champion, and it's great to hear about your passion, and thank you for being with us today as well. Really, really appreciate it. So the next step, because we had a few truncated presentations, we wanted to actually open the floor up and hear from everybody in the audience about a few questions that we had, but Jen, I know that you have another meeting that you have to go to as well. So before that, I'm just curious if you have anything that you sort of want to highlight, from any other parts of the call before you have to step away.
Sure, I know exactly what you're talking about. I just wanted to take accountability. I know I brought up the shooting that happened in Buffalo without a lot of forewarning. It's a really incredibly delicate topic. And so I think that, just want to be mindful of how we discuss these kinds of things as a group. I think it's definitely relevant to trauma science to talk about that link between mass shooters and trauma. But I think having a trauma informed discussion, we also need to center the impacts on the communities that are targeted. And, events like this can have such a multi-generational ripple effect on targeted communities, which in the case of Buffalo is the Black community. And this really impacts, ability to dream, and so many other, side effects. And so I just want to make sure that we are bringing that into the conversation as well, and just thinking about those traumatic impacts that have such a wide ripple pulsing effect across our country, as well as we talk about, what causes this and different solutions and things like that. So, if there's interest in having further discussions, we are happy to hold space for that. And I think, these are obviously very deeply, deeply devastating things that happen way too often. And so I don't want to bring them up in a series of policy updates, as if they are the same as, an agency report, because they definitely hold a different weight when people, hear about them and talk about them in the policy sense. So just wanted to provide that additional context and framing, and appreciate having some space to do that. Thanks, Jesse.
No, thank you, Jen. Really appreciate your messaging and how thoughtful you are to all of this. And I just put in the chat, if folks are interested, CTIPP's statement on the recent mass shootings that have taken place, if it's helpful. And just want to uplift a comment in the chat from Terry that there was another attack, and that the Asian American community is also being attacked, and that this is something that is affecting many communities, and we want to continue to create space and find ways to have these conversations. Like Ulysses, you said, I mean, a lot. It's difficult to have these conversations, and it's important to have guardrails and create a safe and brave space when safety isn't always possible. And so just appreciate your leadership, Jen, in sort of having that conversation. So thank you. As we have about 20 minutes left, like I mentioned, Dan and I have been curious to I'll take a step back. During the workshop series, one of the best parts of it, in addition to the incredible knowledge and information that was provided, was the breakout sessions that took place after. We were able to have some, really positive connection and conversation and generative sort of ideas that came out of that. We can talk about what we were just discussing. It is a very heavy topic, and there is, certainly an urgency to it because it is so recent and it just happened over the weekend. And so I want to provide space for that. We are also very curious to know, for those who have done advocacy work and reached out to your congressional offices, what those experiences have been. And we want to sort of hear your experiences through that. Like Dan said, we'll have additional questions next month. And then there's also opportunities for you all to ask questions that are on your mind, or bring up other parts of conversations that are on your mind. So Dan, I don't know if I missed anything opening up this part of the conversation.
No, you've done good.
I appreciate that. It's always good when you get the nod from the mentor. And so want to open it up to the audience about sort of what's on your mind. I know that I just sort of like outlined like a pretty broad umbrella, but what's on your mind, and sort of help us learn from your expertise, your wisdom, and your work as you continue to do it in communities and states around the country. in my trainings. I've been, yes, Godwin. I was taught to count to 10 slowly, and that's exactly why.
Hello, everybody. This is not being selfish, but I'm running for school board in San Diego, California. It's the second largest school district. And my platform is creating trauma-informed restorative justice schools. And I'm having a difficult time trying to explain this to my constituents and the public when I go on debates. I'm pretty stuck somehow to try to explain this, but what I'm starting to do is switching it around and saying the effects of trauma on children and like zero suspensions, things like that, and the toxic stress that kids go through. And then they kind of get it. So I'm struggling trying to promote this platform because I'm serious about, having the 100,000 kids be treated with respect and compassion. So if you have any ideas for me that I could use, please let me know, because I'm very passionate about creating trauma-informed and restorative justice schools. And that's my little bump in the road right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Godwin. You're doing an incredible job. Does anybody have any initial thoughts for Godwin?
Jesse, do you want to talk a little bit about the coaching you provide? Not you, just Jesse
Yeah.
Graham. The coaching you provide to schools?
Yes, I'm trying to get my video back.
Mm.
So I so appreciate your work right off the bat. That is like one of the most impactful roles you can be in, is to do the work with a school board, because they set all the policy. And I've set up a program called Coaching for Community Connection, which I'm working on to help boards of any kind, nonprofits, local government, to start to have conversations with each other about their own stories and why they're there and what their goals are. Because oftentimes I find, and I've worked in schools for many years, that folks get together and they just want to talk. They want to help, right? They want to help the kids have a better education, but they don't understand underlying that hope, that help is a need to work on their own healing and hear other people's stories. So I've developed a framework where I want to just do this work with individual school boards, with individual boards, and I have information about it on my website. I can put that in the chat, but it's really about having conversations and somebody to facilitate that conversation, and that's what I'm offering. So I really believe that I've reached out to my local school board members and had those conversations, and that's where the shift happens is, oh, I never thought about it like that. Right now I'm doing it with the local sheriff's department. He knew that he'd had all the trauma-informed training, but he didn't know how to implement it. And so now we're having a coaching session to implement that training. And it's going all the way up to the state law enforcement training, because it's one thing to have the training, it's another thing to have a conversation and bring it back to yourself and your own experiences. So that's what I would offer. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much.
On my screen, I see Richard and Jess's hand up, as well as some questions or comments in the chat. So Richard.
Yes, I just wanted to add to what Godwin, there is a school here in Nashville called Fall Elementary, Hamilton Elementary, that Matthew Portell was the principal. And there's a great video. It's about an 8-minute video I'm going to put in the chat for you to share with your constituents to give them an idea of what can happen if you bring in a trauma-informed school that minimizes expulsions. So that would be a way to help spread your message and help people see the light. I'm going to put that in the chat box here.
And Godwin, if you want to put the video that you did from your school as well, just for other folks in the call, Godwin has a video. So as we continue to manifest more advocacy for trauma-informed and trauma-responsive schools. We've got a lot of good information out there for sure. Jess, your hand is up.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jess Angel. I'm a peer support specialist, and I have a focus on trauma and supporting those impacted by incarceration. I apologize for not having my video on. I have low internet connection this morning. So I am here in Alaska, and I am the project founder for Vivid Reading Connections. It's a pilot program I'm trying to get established here, and I'm working to provide evidence-informed strategies that help children, caregivers, and incarcerated parents stay connected and thrive. And through some of my research and digging in for some information, I noticed that our school district here has a lack, I guess, of really being trauma informed and aware. And I spoke with the school district, and I was wondering, I was trying to find some key data points about how many children are enrolled in the school district that have an incarcerated parent. And there's no data. There has never been data like that collected. And I'm just kind of curious from everybody here in the community right now, if anybody has noticed that's, missing from their school districts too. Because I found this to be really interesting that there's never been any, and I even contacted a couple other towns in our state and they don't have any either. So I just really found this to be wild that it's not being collected because it's actually one of the ACEs. And so I just wanted some feedback maybe from anybody here that has, maybe seen that lapse too, or if, your school district's doing something like that, collecting some kind of data. Just definitely, I'm really interested to know. Thank you.
Julie, I wonder if Julie Beam, do you want to talk a little bit about your recommendation of focusing on resilience?
Oh, sure, I could. Hey, Godwin, I'm excited to hear that you're running for office. You're gonna be a great school board member. Can't wait.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, we being around for 27 years at the Attachment and Trauma Network, people, are still kind of hesitant about that trauma, especially, I would guess you would get some resistance from potential voters who, don't want to think about children having experienced trauma like that. They just want to push that out of their minds, right? And don't understand the impact, but they do understand that language around resilience, or at least they have a basic understanding that being resilient is a good thing. And so if you can tie it into, the resilience science, maybe they'll have a clearer, maybe that'll be clearer for them. I don't know. I mean, that was just my thought.
Thanks for that, Julie. And thank you for the work that you do at the Attachment Trauma Network as well. Opportunity to shout out your wonderful organization and the great conference you all had a few months ago.
Thank you.
Around educators. So 2 quick thoughts before we continue to open the floor. Jess, not sure if your hand is still up, but one comment for you is it would be interesting in the Burfess ACE questionnaire, they do actually have a question about so question number 4 in the ACE questionnaire is, did you live with anyone who served time or was sentenced to serve time in prison, jail, or another correctional facility? And so it would be interesting if you could cross-reference the Burfess data that is collected by many, many states, if they have the ACE questionnaire in their Burfess data, to begin to find that information. I am not sure if that would work, but it's worth exploring. And then Godwin, to what Julie just said, I think that it's difficult for people at this point to, on either side of the paradigm, whether it was, the trauma and adversity of children being masked, of children not being in school, or the trauma and adversity of going back to school too soon and the COVID pandemic, or wherever folks fall along the paradigm, the stress and adversity and trauma of the coronavirus pandemic certainly opens up. And then Julie's advice around, trauma informed or trauma responsive may even be better language. And then the resilience focus may be helpful. So thank you all for that. That's a great conversation. Godwin, go ahead if you have something else.
I just wanted to thank everybody because I've been taking a lot of notes down here and I really appreciate all, and I feel bad that I'm taking up your time, but it really will help. And I think we need to promote board members and teachers or whoever are interested in this, because this is the way to go to start saving our kids, you know. So my other platform is stopping the school to prison pipeline, and I'm getting claps for that. So, and one of the biggest thing is to start changing schools to trauma-informed and restorative justice type philosophy. So thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. And just some background, Godwin was a principal at a school in San Diego, implemented a trauma-informed program. And my favorite story is you had to lay off the officer. What do they call him?
Police.
The school police, because there
We
was nothing,
promoted him actually.
yeah, there was nothing for him to do because there were no more physical problems in the school. So,
Yeah, he said, you know, Mr. Higa, all I'm doing is standing around, but the biggest problem is the parents driving in the wrong way in the parking lot. So yeah, because of trauma-informed and restorative justice, we eliminated a police officer that was required in all schools in the area that I was at. So thank you, Dan.
Are there any other thoughts or pending questions, Godwin? There's nothing to apologize for. I think that CTIPP's greatest strength and asset as an organization is all of you, and the community that we continue to build and the conversations that we are able to solicit and have as a trusted community around the country. And so are there other thoughts or questions that folks have? Jesse, I see you just put one in the chat, and also want to uplift Dodie's suggestion in the chat.
Can I
You're coming through.
can I bring it up, or do you want me to wait a minute?
Oh,
okay.
no.
So I've been a speech therapist for about 30 years, and ever since I've become trauma informed, I have a really hard time making kids eligible for special education. And the process we use, I feel, and I've written about this, is causing somewhat more trauma by isolating kids with a disability that is really an issue with their attention and memory, often because of toxic stress or trauma or ACEs. And I find myself in this position where I cannot physically engage in that process anymore. And I'm just wondering if anybody's doing any work on that eligibility process to make it more trauma informed at the federal level, because I'm being told to jump on a call with a kid that I don't know and provide speech and language services. And I feel like that is like totally not relationship based, not with the school, not with the kids. And I feel like we're really doing a disservice. And I just got off a call today with an administrator who said that she was trauma informed. So we're going to be having this meeting about it. And I just want to know if there's anything going on at this federal level or state levels about looking at special education process and making it more, or getting rid of it and starting over in my mind. So. Over addressing.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of, but there is obviously a tendency in our countries, it's been described to me, of eject and reject the way that our systems operate, and then we see how that negatively cascades throughout our society pretty obviously. I mean, there's a correlation between us moving from that model to then disengagement in various aspects. And so don't know if tear down, rebuild is the right model or what, but something certainly needs to be done. And we are developing at CTIPP a comprehensive vision for what trauma-informed society can look like, starting before someone's born. How do we develop healthy communities, healthy families, and help support that? as many systems as we can imagine, people touching along the way without silos being included, and then end of life care, bereavement care. How do we take care of those that are left behind? A comprehensive vision across the lifespan of what a trauma-informed society can look like. As we develop that, we will invite feedback. I think that is another area I'll have to go back. It's 16 dimensions. I haven't memorized all of them yet, but look if we have that. If not, it's certainly one of those things to include, and then invite others as you review those. We want to get your feedback. Like I said earlier, I mean, there's expertise and wisdom throughout our network and throughout the country of folks doing work in various areas and aspects at the community, state, federal, tribal, other levels. And so I just wanted to throw that out as the non-answer answer of, you're certainly right. We definitely need to do something about that and support all students.
If anyone wants to have the conversation with me about what to do in the moment, like when you're in the situation, I would love to have some partners to try new things with, because I feel like we can do things differently by just the way we respond to each case that comes our way. Instead of saying, okay, I'm just going to evaluate the student, I'm saying, no, I'm not going to evaluate the student. Let's review the records together. Let's bring the family in. Let's talk to people. And that's that's what special education was intended to do. So I feel like we can work within what we have and use this current system in a different way. But that's what I would love to have some partners to do that with. So I'm going to put my email in here. If anybody wants to connect, I would love that. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Godwin, when's the election?
The primary is in a couple weeks, June 7th, and the general is November 8th.
So good luck.
The good thing is my opponent has no idea what trauma-informed restart is, and I'm getting a really good, a better reception trying to explain this. So hopefully we can do this. Trauma-informed schools.
Looking forward to it. As we close out the call, thank you all for a wonderful conversation. Thank you to our presenters earlier in the call for being with us and sharing their knowledge and expertise as well. We will have another CTIPP CAN call. Again, it's the third Wednesday of every month from 2 to 3:30 Eastern Time. If you don't get our emails, you could sign up for the National Trauma Campaign, or you can send me an email as well, and I am happy to add you to the listserv. And next month, we will officially have launched our Press On initiative, and we will be talking more about that, as well as some other wonderful presentations and continuing to get community input. We will continue to open up the calls and conversations for community input to leverage your expertise, and to the point that Jesse and Godwin have made, start to have other conversations where even outside of this presentation model, we can just have community conversations about various subjects. And so if there are ideas of other things that you all want to discuss, please feel free to reach out to us as well, as we continue to work toward the CTIPP model being community-led, trauma-informed, prevention-focused, and healing-centered, with all of those implications. Please sign on to the MIECHV the sign-on letter. Go to wehealus.org before the end of the month and help participate in that. And we look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you so much. Thank you. We love you.